Hey there! Ready to unlock some of those mind mysteries you've been curious about? We're diving deep into psychology today. And with the research you sent, this is going to be fascinating.
It really is incredible what psychology reveals about us. From those conscious decisions we make to the subconscious stuff kind of quietly driving us.
Right. Like, where do we even begin? When we say psychology, what are we really trying to grasp here?
Well, at its heart, it's the science of the mind, how it works, how it affects our behavior. Psychology tries to untangle that knot of human experience, our thoughts, feelings, actions, the whole shebang.
It's like we're trying to decode the most powerful computer ever, but it's our own minds. Though something's always bugged me. How do you study thoughts? You can't exactly, like, hold them in your hand.
You're hitting on a really important point. It's a bit like, think of nuclear physics. Physicists can't observe atoms directly, but they study what they do, how they behave. Psychology is similar. We use observable actions as clues to the mind's inner workings.
So it's kind of like detective work, looking for clues to figure out those hidden motives.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole scientific approach to studying the mind, it really got going in 1879. That's when Wilhelm Wundt set up the very first experimental psychology lab over in Leipzig, Germany. It was a total game changer, made studying the mind more structured, more about evidence.
Wow, a real trailblazer.
Now, looking at what you sent over, it's clear psychology isn't just one thing. It's more like this huge interconnected web of different fields, each with its own focus.
You got it. It's incredibly multifaceted, really. We've got clinical psychology, all about mental health and well-being, cognitive psychology, which digs into thinking, memory, intelligence. And then there's developmental psychology, looking at how people change over their whole lifespan. And those are just a few.
And they all kind of weave together, right? Giving us this fuller picture of what makes us tick. Like, I find it so interesting how our childhoods, our earliest experiences can have such a huge impact on us, even as adults, which is where clinical psychology comes in, I guess, trying to make sense of it all. Exactly. Clinical psychology is really interested in how our past experiences, especially those early ones, can shape us emotionally and psychologically. We're not always consciously aware of these influences, but they can stick with us, influencing how we see ourselves, how we see other people, the whole world, really.
It's wild how much our past can shape us without us even realizing it. And it's not just our past, right? The people around us, our social situations, they all play a part too. That's where social psychology comes in, showing how we're influenced by others even when we don't realize it.
Absolutely. Social psychology digs into the power of the situation, how it can sway our actions. You've probably heard of the ash line experiment. It's classic social psychology. People were asked to judge the length of lines, but there was a twist. Everyone else in the group was told to give the wrong answer on purpose.
Wait, really? They were messing with the participant? I bet that had some interesting results.
Oh, it did. Many people actually conformed to the group's wrong answers, even though they knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
They'd rather fit in, avoid standing out, even if it means ignoring what they could see with their own eyes.
That is both fascinating and a little scary. It makes you realize how much social pressure affects us, even when we think we're making our own choices.
For sure. And that's just one tiny example of what social psychology explores.
It's like our social world is this invisible force, subtly pushing and pulling us in ways we don't even realize. Okay, so we've got clinical psychology looking at how our past shapes us, social psychology showing how our present social world does the same, but then there's evolutionary psychology. That gives us this whole other perspective, right? A much bigger picture.
Right. Evolutionary psychology kind of takes the long view, trying to understand how humans got to be this way by looking at, evolution.
So like looking way back in time to see how we became us, one of the big questions there is about our brains, right? Why are human brains so much bigger than other primates?
Exactly. And the main theory is that it's all about our complex social lives. Imagine our ancestors trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
They had to navigate these intricate webs of social alliances, rivalries, cooperation. Those who were good at reading social cues, at figuring out what others were thinking, they had a better shot at survival.
So basically, the more socially skilled you were, the more likely you were to live, find a mate, pass on those genes for better social skills. And over time, those skills, that brain power, became even more important.
Yep, precisely. Social complexity went up, and so did the demands on our brains. That's why humans ended up with these advanced cognitive abilities.
It makes you wonder what our ancestors would make of our world today. Social media, the internet, everything's so interconnected now.
I know, right? Their world was all about navigating hierarchies, building alliances, surviving day to day. Totally different challenges.
Okay, so we've got clinical, social, evolutionary, and then there's cognitive psychology, which really gets into the nitty-gritty of how our minds work, thinking, remembering, all that good stuff.
Exactly. It's about those mental processes we often take for granted.
Yeah.
How we make sense of information, store it, retrieve it, solve problems, all those things that make us, well, thinking beings.
And it makes us question what intelligence even means, doesn't it? Like, is it just about having a high IQ?
That's the million-dollar question. Cognitive psychology shows it's way more nuanced than that. Like, there was this study on Brazilian street vendors, these kids with little formal education, but they were amazing at math when it came to their daily transactions. They could do complex calculations in their heads while selling, but struggled with the same problems in a classroom.
Wow, really? So it's not just about knowing the math, it's how you apply it, the context.
Exactly. That study challenged the whole idea of intelligence as one fixed thing. It showed that it's a bunch of skills shaped by what we experience, the demands of our environment.
It's like those street vendors developed a special kind of intelligence, perfectly suited to their daily lives. Okay, this is already fascinating, and we're just getting started. We've got clinical, social, evolutionary, cognitive, but are we ready to get into specifics, see how these play out in real life?
I'm ready. Where should we dive in first?
Let's start with those early years, the foundation of it all. Up next, a deeper dive into the world of developmental psychology. So developmental psychology, it is that journey from tiny humans to, well, us. It's incredible how much we change over a lifetime.
It really is. And what's so cool about developmental psychology is it's not just describing those changes, it's figuring out WHY, how genes, our environment, our experiences all mix together to make us who we are.
Like we're untangling this giant, messy, totally unique tapestry for every single person. And one thing that blows my mind is how much babies, even tiny ones, are already capable of. You think they're helpless, but they're learning constantly.
Oh, absolutely. They're like little sponges soaking it all up. They might not be talking, but they're observing, experimenting, making sense of the world in their own way. Did you know even their math skills are kind of amazing?
Wait, babies doing math? How can they even, they can't tell us what they're thinking.
That's where those clever experiments come in. There's this classic one. They show a baby, a Mickey Mouse doll, right? Then hide it behind a screen. Then they sneak another Mickey behind there, so now there should be two. But they secretly take one away. When they lower the screen, only one Mickey. And the baby stares and stares, longer than if there'd been two.
So it's like baby magic. But I still don't get the math part.
That surprise stare, that's the key. It means they were expecting something, two Mickeys, because on some level, they get addition. Expectation broken. That's what grabs their attention.
No way. They have like number sense before they can even talk. That's wild.
It's just the beginning of what they're figuring out. Developmental psychologists are always finding new ways to test this stuff, showing just how much learning is packed into those first few years.
Makes you realize how important those early experiences are, right? Like they set the stage for everything else.
They really do.
Yeah.
And as kids grow, those abilities just blossom. Language, problem solving, how to get along with others, it explodes.
And that's where it gets even trickier, right? Nature versus nurture, our genes, our environment, they're both pulling the strings.
Totally. Take language, for example. Kids are hardwired to learn it, to pick up grammar and all that. But what language they actually speak, their accent, how they use it, that's all from their environment. Who they're around, who's talking to them, it makes a huge difference.
So it's like we've all got the tools, but our experiences are what shape how we use them. It's both, not one or the other.
Exactly. This whole nature and nurture dance keeps going through childhood, into the teenage years, even adulthood, really.
Speaking of teenagers, man, adolescence, that's a whole other ball game, right? Hormones, figuring out who you are, it's a lot.
It's definitely a time of huge change, but it's not all chaos. It's also about incredible growth. They're developing more complex thinking skills, becoming capable of empathy, figuring out their values.
It's like their brains are doing a complete remodel, getting ready for all the complicated stuff adulthood throws at you.
And while, there are challenges, there's also so much potential. It's when people find their passions, what's important to them, the foundation for who they'll become.
So development doesn't just stop when you hit a certain age?
Nope, not at all. We're always evolving, always changing throughout our whole lives.
Okay, so from those first few moments to the craziness of being a teenager, what about adulthood and getting older? What does psychology tell us about that part of life? Let's find out. It's kind of mind-blowing, this whole idea that we're not just set in our ways as adults. We're still changing, still developing.
It really makes you think about aging differently, doesn't it? We tend to focus on what we lose, but there's so much potential for growth, even later in life.
Yeah. But what about, like, our brains? Everyone worries about memory loss and all that as we get older. Is that just inevitable?
The million-dollar question. It's not quite that simple. Yeah, some things decline, processing speed, for instance, but other things can actually get better with age, like our vocabulary, our knowledge base.
Go on. So it's not all downhill. There's hope for us yet.
Absolutely. And what's cool is that research shows lifestyle makes a difference. Staying mentally active, being social, taking care of your health,
Yeah.
it all helps those brains stay sharp.
So it's not all about genetics. We can actually DO stuff to stay sharp, which makes me think about that whole mind-body connection, right? Like, our mental health affects our physical health and vice versa. That's health psychology territory, isn't it?
100%. It's all about how our thoughts, emotions, stress, all that good stuff impacts our physical well-being. Our minds and bodies aren't separate. They're totally connected.
Like they say, healthy mind, healthy body. But health psychology really digs into the HOW of it all.
Exactly. Think about stress. It's not just in your head. It gets physical, too. When we're stressed out, our bodies pump out cortisol. And over time, that stuff can really do a number on us. Immune system takes a hit, heart problems.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Wow, so stress really is a killer. Crazy how our mental state can have such a huge impact on our physical health.
It's wild, right?
Okay.
And that's why health psychology is so important. It helps us understand how to manage stress, build healthier habits, all that good stuff that helps us live longer, healthier lives.
Which brings up another challenge, actually changing our behavior, right? We all know we should eat our veggies, but doing it's the hard part.
Oh, for sure. And that's something health psychology can help with. It's not about just telling people what to do. It's about figuring out why they do what they do. What are the barriers? What motivates them? Then you can tailor strategies to help them make lasting changes.
So it's not one size fits all. You got to get inside people's heads a bit.
Exactly. Everyone's different, with different triggers and motivations. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The impact of our past, the power of our social world, how our minds work, and how it all ties into our physical health. But we haven't even touched on the brain itself. That's neuropsychology, right? Trying to map out that incredibly complex organ.
It's like everything we do, every thought, feeling, it all comes back to those neurons firing in our brains. And one way neuropsychologists figure this stuff out is by studying people who've had brain injuries, right? To see how damage to one part affects everything else.
Yeah, exactly. If someone has a stroke, for example, and suddenly they can't speak, well, that tells us something about where language lives in the brain. It's like piecing together a puzzle, using these cases to figure out how it all works.
Like detective work, but for the brain. And then there's all that fancy tech now, right? Don't they have scans that can actually show brain activity?
Oh yeah, like TT scans. You can have someone do a task like reading or speaking, and the scan shows which parts of their brain light up. It's like seeing the brain in action.
It's incredible. The things we can do now makes you realize how far we've come in understanding this amazingly complex organ.
And we're still just scratching the surface. Every discovery just leads to more questions, which is what makes it so exciting.
That's been the theme of this whole deep dive, really. From those first moments of life to how our brains work, psychology is about unraveling all those mysteries that make us human.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that just about wraps things up for us today. And to you, dear listener, thanks for coming along on this incredible journey with us. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a whole new perspective on what makes us tick. Until next time, keep exploring those fascinating mysteries of the mind.